Hey guys, this video covers some of the most terrifying stories I found here on Reddit for 2 hours straight. I'm assuming most of you are probably new, so a sub would really help me make more of this. Sit back, relax for the next 2 hours, and without further ado, here's the first one. I found a door in the woods that goes everywhere, and I can't stop using it to watch you. Not you specifically, I guess, although you might be one of the 200 or so people I've been lurking behind over the last 7 months. But that isn't what has me spooked. I think someone else is using it to watch me. I've lived in the Midwest my whole life. Total nowheresville. The place I'm renting backs onto the woods that border the east end of town, and since I grew up not too far from here, I'm pretty familiar with them. Used to trek all over when I was a kid, walk the trails with my dog as a teenager, and still go out there pretty often as an adult, easily twice a week. Maybe like the back of my hand is a stretch, but I can definitely get from A to B without a map, is what I'm saying. So imagine my surprise when I found a roughly square concrete bunker wedged against the side of a hill back in December. It was just before Christmas, snow on the ground from an overnight flurry, and I had been walking for a while, maybe an hour since leaving my backyard. I know the area well. It's all undeveloped public forest, and there's almost no structures in it that I'm aware of, maybe a fire lookout. This, though, was weird. Solid concrete with one of those gray-green metal doors like the entrance to a power substation or something. Big danger, no entry sign on there. Some graffiti too, just tags and the like, and almost swallowed by snow and dead weeds and spindly overgrowth. I figure that's why I never seen it before. In the spring, it's probably mostly covered by bushes, and the concrete just kind of blends into the foliage. So, of course, my brain yells World War II bunker, and I'm running up the incline towards half-buried treasure. Turns out, though, not a bunker at all. I got the door open with a little effort and a lot of creaking metal, and behind it is just a hallway, maybe 10 feet long and only a few inches wider than the door. Walls are concrete, like the outside. In fact, it kind of looks like a solid block of cement that someone dug a corridor through. Scratches everywhere, too, all over the floor and walls and ceiling. Then, at the far end, another door. The first time I stepped inside, I was struck by how quiet it was. I'm used to it now, pretty sure it's just the shape of the hill around the building keeping the wind out. The only light is whatever comes through the open door behind you, which, being winter, was that bright, almost bluish white of the snow reflecting the sky. I ran my gloved fingers over the scratches. They're dug pretty deep, purposeful-like. I figured out later they were symbols, but I won't get ahead of myself. At this point, I still thought it was just the vestibule for some bigger bunker complex under the forest. Expected a staircase down when I opened the far door. So I gripped the handle and turned. Immediately, light behind me. This is when I figured out the scratches all over the walls and ceiling were symbols, because when I looked back to find the light source, I realized it was coming from the walls and the ceiling and the floor. One symbol on each was glowing like there was an LED behind it, and I'd just completed the circuit. Green, the color of the sky before a tornado. Then, I opened the door. Like I said before, I expected this to lead into some kind of bunker. Stairs, hallways, rooms full of rusty bunk beds, fallout symbols on the walls. What I got was so much fucking weirder. You have to understand when I tell this story that I never meant for this to go so goddamn badly. I never meant to become some weirdo stalking strangers for kicks. I'm a normal dude. I have a normal job. I have friends. I am single, admittedly, but not in the incel kind of way. But when I stepped through that door, in the woods behind my house, and emerged from someone's bedroom closet on the other side of the country, I nearly shit myself. That's where it started. I hightailed it out of that bedroom when I heard someone on the stairs, shut the door behind me, spent a few minutes catching my breath. I convinced myself it couldn't be real. I'd open the door again and pay closer attention to the room and realize it was fake. I couldn't have been on the second floor of a house. I couldn't have been looking out the damn window, curtains fluttering in a light breeze with the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. So I took a few deep breaths and tried the door again.
Same glow, different symbols. I didn't actually realize they were different symbols at the time, but with the benefit of hindsight, I'm erring on the side of they were different symbols because I did not return to the bedroom. Nope, an Italian restaurant kitchen. Not even kidding. Fluorescent lights, tile floor, stainless steel, everything else. A bunch of line cooks shouting at one another in strong Brooklyn accents. I stepped in through the rear service door and the smell of marinara sauce and fresh seafood hit me like a wall. So I'm losing my mind, right? Back in the hallway, closed the door. Confused and needing some air, I checked around the outside and there's nothing remarkable about the building. It's concrete on all sides as far as I can tell, with the, and I really hate to use this word, but magic doorway end buried a little under the hillside. Could have been here for decades, judging by how pitted and pockmarked and derelict it all looks. The sign is recent-ish. It's all scuffed and dirty like it's been there for years, but it's a modern sign. 20 years old tops. No answers outside, so back inside. Open the door, walk into a room. This is how it's been for months. That day I tried 5 or 6 more times, and since then I've been going up there every day. Before work, after work, days off, weekends, and every single time that door led me to a new, completely random place. It only seems to open into doors of roughly the same size and dimensions as the one I stepped through. I can't step into it and out of a barn door or an airplane door, although I have stepped through the door and onto a cruise ship once. Seems as long as it swings on hinges and has the dimensions of an average house door, it's fair game. So that's the first caveat on the everywhere bit. But you're wondering how all this has led me to becoming 2026's preeminent stalker? Well, that's the second caveat. When I'm through that door, nobody can see me. I'm not like invisible, I don't think, because I can see my reflection in things, and I'm not a ghost because I can't walk through walls, and I can interact with stuff just like I would normally. It's just that nobody notices me. Like I'm not supposed to be there, so I'm not. But I am. Honestly, I could stand 2 feet in front of you and you wouldn't see a thing. I've spoken to people, even moved things right in front of them, and they just go about their day like nothing happened. At most, they seem a little confused, like they're sure they heard something, but it goes away before they register it, or they're sure that they put their mug over on the end table, not the coffee table, but shrug it off as bad recollection.
Except they did put it on the end table because I'm the one that moved it to the coffee table. I did it right in front of them. They should have seen me, but they didn't. They never do. And this lets me watch them as much as I want to. Watch you as much as I want to. I've watched people have dinner, sitting at their dining table right beside them. I've been in boardroom meetings and heard colleagues gossip by photocopiers. I've watched folks shower and screw and jerk off in the living room. Seen people stealing from the company till or their parents' wallet or their wife's purse. I've stood in the corner of bedrooms and watched people sleep. Sat behind couples watching TV on the couch. I got on stage at a Bring Me the Horizon concert. I've been in more than a few drug labs and easily a dozen brothels. I'm pretty sure I stumbled across a serial killer one time. So you see why it's intoxicating, right? This whole being an unseen observer in people's lives. Sure, I don't always understand everything. I've ended up in countries where I didn't speak the language, and that kind of limits me to relying on context clues. I think the symbols are like a code that correspond to points in space, like a telephone number. Once it was warm enough for the gloves to come off, I discovered I can touch the symbols in advance. Turning the door handle alone just picks a random set. I tried finding a system, but hell if I could make heads or tails of what specific chicken scratch means what part of an address. The same combo always leads to the same place though, so I can make repeat visits. There's one place I go back to a fair bit, this tool shed in the mountains somewhere. Europe, I think. It's one of the few places I've never seen any other people, and I just sit in the grass to watch the goats climb the rocks. Sometimes I just stare at the clouds. Mostly, though, I watch people. People eating, people sleeping,
people working, people in private moments and public ones, men, women, young and old. But lately, I think I'm the one being watched. At first, it was just paranoia, I guess. I'd been standing in the corner of so many darkened rooms that I began to get the heebie-jeebies anytime I was alone for 5 minutes. I'd look across at the corner of a room at work and be convinced there was someone standing there, even though I couldn't see them. Watching TV at home alone, I'd get the idea in my head that there was someone at the other end of the couch and have to kick my leg out to be sure. The empty chairs at my parents' dinner table would be pushed out just a little further than was necessary, and I'd become convinced someone was sitting in it, watching me, unseen. Then things started to get misplaced. The mug that's a little left than I remember it, milk on the counter instead of in the fridge, my keys missing from the hook I know I hung them on, just like I do every day, an open door I distinctly remember closing. Maybe I just got confused. I wasn't sleeping very well. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear breathing, which makes no sense because I know people can't see or hear you when you walk through that door, but maybe they feel it? I've seen more than a few people look at me, right at me, puzzled, knowing something was off but chalking it up to their imagination. That feeling you get when you think you're being watched? We've all had it before. I think, maybe, in those moments, there is someone watching you.
Now they're watching me. What clinched it for me was the door to the bunker. You see, I always close it, every time. It's pretty hidden now that the bushes have all grown back, and with the door closed, you'd hardly know anything was there at all. Definitely can't see it from the path. Still, I close it, every time, to keep it all to myself. But one day, I made my trek up the hill and found it open, just a little, a crack. So, to be safe, I bought a real hefty padlock and sealed the door up tight, made sure no animals could get in, that the wind wasn't going to blow the door open. It should have held, would have. Then I came back and the padlock was cut clean through and just left there on the ground. And beside it, the door was open, not a little this time, open, all the way. A message. Like you wanted me to know. 'Cause I know you're reading this, and okay, I get it. I've learned my lesson. The door doesn't belong to me. I get it, and I can't take it anymore. I need you to stop. Please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, whoever you are. No more pulling my bed sheets off at night. No more leaving the front door open for me to find in the morning. No more smiley faces drawn in the glass while I'm in the shower. Message received, loud and clear. I promise I won't go back. Just, please. I'm begging. Leave me alone.
Who killed them? Who killed them? So much time has passed that people don't ask me that anymore, mostly because I still fear for my safety just as much as you should. Either way, I don't want to take this to the grave. I'm an old man now, on my way out, so I'll tell you what I remember. It was a hot summer. Your report should have the exact date. Tomas rode in the back of the truck, watching the little favelas go by through the window. Almost none of them had any color, just gray brick and lines of bare concrete peeking through. Carlos drove up front with Mario beside him. I was in the back, staring at the floor of the beat-up unit they'd assigned us. The worst piece of junk you can imagine, if you want to know the truth. God knows where our taxes actually went. I was dizzy, nodding off. We'd been driving for over an hour to reach our destination. The road twisted the whole way. Uphill, downhill, right, left. And on top of that, the heat that season was unbearable. The place they sent us to didn't have a single tree. Everything was buried under those favelas. The assignment? Go investigate a reported case of human trafficking. The place we were headed had a terrible reputation. Murders and daybreak,
Strange disappearances, territory run by the cartels. When we arrived, I couldn't stop myself from throwing the door open and vomiting in the corner of one of the houses. I had to brace my hands against the wall. I felt like my soul was trying to climb out through my mouth. When I finished, I felt that instinct every human being feels when they're in danger, the sense of being watched. I snapped my head up toward one of the rooftops in front of me, and I swear to God, I saw a child duck out of sight. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a curtain falling shut. A silence swallowed the whole place. Carlos asked if I was okay. I told him yes, even though something inside me was already saying this place was bad news. None of us had ever been there before, any of the four of us, and you didn't need more than a glance around to know it wasn't safe. It looked like a narrow, gray labyrinth of houses. Carlos's face didn't believe me, but his voice did. Without meaning to, he had the same feeling I did. Maybe all of us did. We just didn't give it the weight it deserved. We split up once we got to the area. Carlos came with me. I'd patrol the main streets, and he'd cover the streets near a school, where, according to the reports, most of the disappearances were happening. None of us walked in with our weapons drawn. The idea was to patrol without drawing attention. Tomas and Mario stayed by a church, on the far side of the sidewalk from where the patrol truck was parked. Before we split up, I wanted to tell them about the bad feeling I had, that I wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. I didn't. Maybe I told myself it was just my imagination mixing with the town's awful silence. You have the reports. I assume you at least read them or looked into this before coming to interview me. Well, doesn't matter. That was the worst day of my life. Reporters showed up to get the story, and not one of them lifted a finger. Sons of bitches. I hope every one of those bastards burns in hell. Anyway, where was I? Can you remind me? Oh, right. Forgive me if I lose the thread. It's been so many years. Climbing the steep streets of that place, I noticed there wasn't a soul outside. I wondered where everyone had gone. Was it somebody's birthday? Something about it turned my stomach. When I reached the top of the street, there was a small park, the closest thing the town had to a center. I decided to sit and rest a while. Before sitting, I set my vest down and unbuttoned my shirt halfway down my chest. The moment I did, I caught, out of the corner of my eye, people peering out from the rooftops of their houses. I knew then that the feeling of being watched hadn't been in my head. I pretended not to notice and leaned back on the little bench, trying to rest. I kept my eyes half open, faking sleep, and sure enough, there they were, still watching. They knew who belonged there and who didn't. After lying there a good while, I got up. I figured Carlos had finished checking the streets near the school by now. The sun was sinking behind the mountains you could see from up there, since the park sat on a high ground. A beautiful, deep red dusk lit up the whole place. If you'd been there, you'd have sworn it was somebody's last day alive. I think it was a sign of God, warning us something terrible was coming.
Heading back down the slope, I nearly split my lip tripping over something. The shadows those houses threw across the street made it hard to see where I was stepping, and my eyes hadn't adjusted yet. I'd gone straight from bright daylight into shade, hurrying to meet the others at the church and tell them I hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary, just locals peeking out from rooftops like they were hiding something. Exhausted, I reached the bottom of the street, ready to head straight for where the truck, Mario, and Tomas were waiting. That's when my heart gave a hard, sudden lurch. I froze for a few seconds, sucked in a breath, and a chill ran from my heels straight up to the back of my neck. Something terrible was happening. I knew it. So I picked up my pace, broke into a jog. All I wanted was to get out of there, immediately, without leaving anyone behind. I changed direction and went looking for Carlos over by the school. I don't know how to keep going with this part. It's too much for me. Anyway, I stopped caring about drawing attention. All I wanted was out. So instead of jogging, I ran. The road to the school wasn't paved, littered with loose stones. Somehow I never tripped. I could see the school from a distance, a big blue rectangle with white pillars covered in graffiti, ringed by 6-meter fences topped with barbed wire to keep people out. That wasn't all. The closer I came, the more I could make out shouting, wave after wave of an angry crowd. I stayed frightened, confused, my heart hammering somewhere behind my ears. I couldn't see anything from that distance because, like I said, the dirt road leading to the school had so many dips and rises. It was like a curtain. The closer I came, the more the veil of dust and dirt lifted, revealing the whole spectacle. That spectacle, the one the crowd was roaring over with such fury, turned out to be the great host himself, the great magician Carlos, performing an incredible act, how to take a beating from a mob and not die. A pack of animals, that's what they were. Carlos was screaming and desperately trying to shield himself with his arms. One image that's never left me is watching a man land a hard punch to his ribs, hard enough that Carlos spat saliva out of his mouth. I screamed at the top of my lungs for them to leave him alone, that we weren't there to hurt anyone, that we posed no threat, that we'd come to help stop the very problem plaguing the town. It did nothing. My voice just dissolved into the roar of everyone else's. I never even got a clear look at him. The crowd shoved me back, slow and violent. I couldn't tell you how many there were, maybe the whole town, only God knows. The mass of bodies closed over the one gap I had to see through. Before it sealed shut completely, I saw Carlos, his head soaked in blood, trying to explain something while an old man beat him with a wooden plank. Carlos tried to shield himself again, uselessly. Blows from iron pipes, kicks, fists, more planks raining on him from every side. "It's him! It's him! Kill the rapist!" I heard someone shout from inside the crowd. Somehow, I forced my way through, shoving with everything I had at anyone in front of me. A few grabbed at my back, but I didn't let them stop me. When I reached the center of it all, I found Carlos, crying. He saw me, and his eyes lit up like he'd just seen Christ himself. He crawled toward me on his hands and knees, leaving a trail of blood from his stomach, his clothes shredded, his body bare. He grabbed my knee and said, with what little strength was left in him, tell them why we came. Please, tell them. They'll kill me if you don't." My throat closed up. He'd already lost most of his teeth to the beating. His eyes were swollen shut. I think he lost his sight moments later.
Go on, tell them. A man wearing a copper ring drove a fist into his face, bending his nose sideways, exposing bone underneath. Carlos collapsed a couple feet from me, his hands slipping off my leg, his body twisting in pain. Mama! Ah! Mama! I couldn't hold back a tear. I grabbed the arm of the man who just shattered his nose and hit him as hard as I could. He went down instantly. Everyone turned and stared at me. For one moment, everything went silent. It felt like the crowd had calmed, like maybe this was over. I was wrong. It was only the beginning. The state sent us. Is checking the streets reason enough to beat a man half to death? Does that seem fair to you, you bastards? I shouted. You're his accomplice, aren't you? Rats, all of you, all the same. Get him too. He's part of it. The girls, he's responsible too. I froze, confused for a second. The sun had fully set by then. The street lamps were flickering on one by one, lighting up the scene. Then all the men came at me at once. So many blows landed at the same time that the pain blurred into one long, cold numbness. Grab the other one! He's getting away! Everyone turned, me included. I saw Carlos trying to run, his whole body slick with blood, clutching at his pants, trying to cover himself, waddling like a penguin as fast as he could manage. It didn't matter. They all went after him. A stone sailed over the crowd and caught him in the heel. He went down face first into a mud ditch. A man was on top of me, pinning me down, but he was distracted, watching the 20-odd men swarming Carlos. I took the chance, leaned in and bit down as hard as I could, tearing off part of his ear. He howled, and I headbutted him. He dropped, writhing. I got up and ran for the truck. I could see the church cross from a distance, so I ran and ran. The crowd noticed, and a few of them gave chase right on my heels. I had to warn the others what was happening, that we needed to save Carlos, that the crowd was screaming something about girls. Give me a moment. Let me get some water. My throat's gone dry. Water tastes different when you're old. It tastes like life instead of some clear, odorless liquid. Do you see this scar on my foot? A perfect circle. I earned that mark that night. A little souvenir that said, "Come back here again and we won't be as kind as we were the last time." Anyway, let's keep going. The church cross kept growing larger. I knew I was close to the truck. Relief flooded through me when I turned the corner where I'd thrown up hours earlier. The ones chasing me had fallen way behind. But when I rounded that corner, I saw a massive fireball rising up right as I arrived. Those animals had torched the truck. I knew right then that whatever hope I had left was gone. Against the wall were Tomas and Mario, both stripped bare. Like Carlos, they were covered in blood, but theirs wasn't from fists, it was from blades. Shallow cuts, but deep enough to send rivers of blood running down them. There were 100 of them, maybe 200, maybe more, and there were only 4 of us. A few people peeked timidly from rooftops, filming the whole spectacle, others screaming for them to let us go. The screaming ones were mostly women, some covering their children's eyes, while the kids themselves watched grinning like it was some kind of entertainment. It wasn't long before the ones I thought I'd left behind caught up and slammed me to the ground. My vision went blank. There was no hope left. I thought that was going to be my last day, dying in a way I never imagined, in a place I never imagined. Once they had me down, they dragged me against the wall with the others. I turned toward my partners. They turned toward me too. Our eyes all said the same thing: fear, and somewhere underneath it, total despair. When I looked up again, I saw stones flying straight at me. They struck my face over and over, clattering to the ground with a sound like marbles. Eventually, I just stopped feeling the pain. I'd accepted whatever was coming. After the stoning, through the barking dogs, the screaming, the blows, I heard the sound of vans pulling up. A narrow path opened through the crowd, and TV reporters and camera crews pushed their way through the mob towards us. A striking woman, no older than 30, fixed her hair in the thin necklace resting against her pale, delicate throat. There were other journalists too, but out of all of them, she was the one who wanted the hosts of this spectacle. The rest were busy interviewing locals. She gave the cameraman a thumbs up and walked towards me. I lifted my head with everything I had left. I barely had the strength to move my own neck.
We're here reporting live on an incident that has drawn a large crowd. Behind me, a police officer is being assaulted. If your children are watching, I'd recommend turning this off. She stepped aside and the camera swung onto me. For a moment, I felt ashamed of myself. I didn't want my family, especially my mother, to see me like that. The microphone moved from the reporter's mouth to an older, heavy-set woman's. "Ma'am, what happened here? Let me guess, the police up to their old tricks again?" the reporter said, sweeping her hair back off her forehead. "They abused some little girls, the sons of bitches. We're sick of these filthy pigs. All they do is tear this community apart. I hope every last one of them dies." The woman kept talking, but by then her words had blurred into noise. My vision had gone hazy. I wanted to die. The other camera crews turned to my partners, naked, a thin coat of blood the only thing covering them. A man in the crowd with a baseball bat forced Tomas's arm out straight. Tomas fought it, but 5 men held him down until his arm was fully extended, and the man with the bat swung it down as hard as he could. Tomas's arm folded in half. His screaming drowned out the crowd itself. It was horrific. The bone had splintered so badly the skin couldn't hold, and it tore through, blood pouring out like a burst pipe. The photographs taken that night are proof of the hell we lived through. The autopsies showed how far the bodies had deteriorated. The coroners said they couldn't be put back together, so cremation was the only option. After Tomas came Mario. The camera crews recoiled in horror as a splintered piece of wood, studded with sharp nails, flew out of the crowd and lodged itself in Mario's face. His screams were worse than Tomas's. The dogs kept barking, louder and louder. When my blurred vision drifted upward, I saw a white shirt swaying on a clothesline overhead. For a moment, the noise around me faded, and strangely, that made me feel calm. Someone grabbed my hair and held a phone up to my mouth. Every reporter and camera was on me now. I didn't understand why until Tomas screamed at me to answer it, that answering and calling for backup might be the only thing that saved us. On the other end, there was nothing but silence for a few seconds.
until I felt a blow to the back of my head. "This is Officer Manuel. They're killing us. You need to send someone, please. I don't know what happened with these people. They're accusing us of abusing some girls. That's not true. Someone must have made that up." A woman answered on the other end, sounding like she had no interest in taking the call. "Well, did you identify yourselves from the start?" The reporters pressed their microphones closer to my mouth. "Yes, we identified ourselves from the very beginning. We need help as fast as possible, please." My voice, weak before, sped up now. Everything inside me wanted to scream for help at the top of my lungs. "Well, look, we don't have many units available right now." An uncomfortable silence hung on the line. "I'll see what we can do. We'll send units in a couple of minutes."
And as you read in the report, no more units ever came. Not even paramedics showed up. That's the part that still stuns me. The TV crews reached us first, with no trouble at all, pushing straight through the crowd, even interviewing us, while the state units never made it. I waited for hours, foolishly clinging to that flicker of hope. The whole thing was broadcast live on every national news channel. My own country turned its back on me, on all of us, officers who'd only come for a just cause. That's why I swore I'd never go back, because after surviving that hell by some miracle, I got threats of every kind, that if I ever said a word, they'd kill me. The government offered me a spot in their victim support program. I didn't take it. As an investigator, I'd already seen enough by then to know the obvious. The government and organized crime are in bed together. The rest you already know. There's nothing more to tell. The old man looks down again at his bare foot, at the circular scar. The interviewer does too, and the old man notices. "Seems your curiosity's got the better of you. I see you've stopped writing down what I've told you. I think you've gotten so caught up in this story that you're not doing this for work anymore, but because you actually care. Isn't that right? Well, let's keep going." When they pulled the phone away from my mouth, a swarm of people had gathered around Carlos. They dragged him from the school all the way to the church. I watched men pull gas cans from a black pickup truck, others closing in with knives. The cameras all swung toward him at once. It was horrific. They sliced his stomach open. Fat and intestines spilled out, slow and wet. I threw up at the sight of it. Carlos tried to hold his own guts in, tried to push them back inside himself. The same man who'd cut him open moved behind him and drove the blade into his back. Carlos's hands flew to his spine, and his intestines dropped to the ground. I think the intestines hurt him more, because when they hit the dirt, he doubled over, struggling, trying to gather them back up. That's when the men with knives closed in on him completely. The crowd in front of me blocked the rest from view. All I heard was a choking sound, the kind you hear when farmers slit a chicken's throat. Mario stared at me, terrified, that piece of wood still lodged in the side of his face. His chest heaved with sobs, his lips trembling like a heartbeat. Tomas lay beside him in a pool of blood. I think he'd already bled out and died. If you're asking me, Mario got the worst of it between the two of them.
They stacked Tomas and Carlos's bodies together, then tied Mario's arms, hands, and feet and threw him on top of the pile. The men poured the gas cans over all three. Mario looked at me one last time, his chest still shaking with sobs. Every last one of those miserable bastards struck a match. It took a few tries before one caught. They threw it onto Mario. A sound went through the crowd that I swear I heard the second that match landed on his forehead. Mario went up in flames, screaming like a dying animal, kicking wildly. He rolled like a log for a few seconds, slid off the pile of bodies, then kept rolling in a circle through the crowd, trying to put himself out. It was obvious that wasn't going to happen. Tomas and Carlos's bodies were already burning, filling the air with an unbearable smell of scorched flesh.
The beautiful reporter couldn't hold back her own sickness and vomited. Everyone watched Mario roll from place to place, desperate to smother the flames. Even the men who'd been guarding me stepped closer to the crowd to get a better view. I used that moment. With whatever strength I had left, I got up and ran. It was so dark I could barely see, and suddenly a kid appeared in front of me holding a metal pipe. I stumbled back, but he drove it into my right foot with everything he had. I wanted to scream from the pain but held it in. The boy smiled, jumping with excitement. So I pulled the pipe out of my foot. It was hot. The little bastard had heated it up first. The boy stopped smiling, stopped jumping. There was no one else around, just an old brick wall. So with everything I had left, I started swinging that pipe at him. He was pinned against the wall, gasping, half his face already caved in from the blows. He raised a hand, trying to signal for me to stop. I didn't care. Somehow, I made it to the nearest highway where some drunk college kids picked me up and got me to the ER, and that's how I survived that night. This story is based on true events. Some names, places, and details have been changed for privacy and dramatic effect. Inspired by the Night of Tláhuac, Mexico, 2004.
When my mother died, I decided to clone her and raise her as my daughter. It was the best decision I could have made. I knew my mother was dying. I'd known it for a long time. Countless nights were spent crying, reminiscing, and trying to spend as much time as possible with her. But I truly realized that her time was coming to an end on a September night as I sat next to her, clutching her frail hands. They used to be so strong. Those were the hands that would pick me up after I fell as a toddler. The hands that would let me lick the batter off the spoon when she baked. The hands that would press against my forehead to check for a fever when I didn't feel well. And now her fragile hands were in mine as she stared at me with cloudy eyes. It took everything in me to bite back the tears and return her gaze with a smile. I couldn't lose her. She was my everything, my world. But even in those desperate moments, I knew there was nothing I could do to get my mom's youth back. So I did the next best thing. I cloned her. I wanted to pay her back and give her the life she deserved. My mother rarely talked about her childhood, but through bits and pieces, I could tell that it had been hard for her. She had done so much to raise me with the proper values and wisdom, and I felt that I owed everything to her. So, to pay her back, I would remake her childhood and give her what she truly deserved. I was determined to forge her not just into the woman she had become, but an even better version. A happier Gwen. A healthier Gwen. I won't disclose the details of the company here because I don't want them getting in trouble, but the process was seamless. All I had to do was pay in cash and send her body to the lab. Once they were done collecting DNA samples, they would cremate her and send me her ashes. After a bit of waiting, I would get my mother back, except I would be the one raising her as my own. When little Gwen first arrived, I was nervously arranging the house. I wasn't sure why, she was just a baby after all, but my mother would clean before every guest no matter what. Even as I grew older and my visits grew less frequent, she would always do a deep clean before I came home. My heart leapt with joy when the man knocked on the door and handed me my Gwen, still swaddled in a light pink blanket. She looked so much like the faded baby photos I had seen of my mother decades ago. A tear rolled down my cheek as I looked into her eyes, the same dusty blue that I remembered before the glaucoma and the cataracts took away its vibrance. She was beautiful. No, she was more than beautiful. She was my mother.
From that day forward, I dedicated my life to raising Gwen the way she raised me. Blood, sweat, and tears were put into math homework, swim practice, chess lessons, and writing. I wanted her to achieve greatness. She would be everything my mother wanted to be in her past life. I would make sure of it. It wasn't always easy, especially as Gwen grew older. She was around 12 when we began fighting more. Every day she would look more like my mother, but act less like her. She put the books away and spent more time borrowing my phone. Instead of swimming practice, she would talk about how all her friends were on the soccer team. The extra math problems Gwen would solve when she was younger were greeted with grumbles and complaints. It was so unlike her. My mother had a deep passion for math that carried her into a career as a mathematics professor. She loved swimming ever since she first learned how to swim. Even in her later years, laps in the pool offered her weak joints some needed relief. And reading was what had turned her into such a well-spoken woman. My mother loved nonfiction. The few books little Gwen did read were usually fantasy, filling her head with unnecessary distractions. She was Gwen. She had the flesh and blood of my mother. They had the same brain, the same heart, the same hands and eyes. So why were their souls so different?
The first night Gwen and I had a real fight was when she insisted on switching to soccer. I had been reading a magazine at the table when she approached me, homework in hand. She usually had me review her homework and check for errors, especially after her chess lessons. She was prone to making simple mistakes. Gwen slid the paper towards me before asking, "Mom, would you consider switching me to soccer instead of swimming at school?" "Why soccer?" I asked, puzzled. "You've always loved swimming." "All my friends are in soccer. Plus, it looks like fun." I set the magazine down on the table and looked at her. "Sometimes we need to dedicate ourselves to one thing at a time. It's important to have the discipline to do things, even when they grow hard." "I don't want to quit because it's hard. I just don't like it." She sounded annoyed. "You're not quitting. Sticking to swimming will help you later in life." "I hate swimming," Gwen cried out. "It's boring, and the people on the team are weird. Stop acting like you know more than me." "I do know more than you." "No, you don't. You don't know me. You just expect me to do whatever you want," she shouted. I hoped the neighbors weren't able to hear. Agitated, I replied, "I'm doing this because I know you. You'll thank me later." Tears welled in Gwen's eyes as she glared at me before stomping off to her room and slamming the door shut. I scoffed at the idea of my mother playing soccer. She couldn't care less about it. Gwen only wanted to join because her friends were there. So selfish. She might not have realized how good swimming was for her, but she knew how much it meant to me. How could she treat me like this? As it got closer to midnight, guilt began to eat at me. Gwen might have acted differently, but she was all I had left of my mom. I didn't want to hurt her. She just wasn't acting like herself. I knew her. I had known her for 50 years. I knew her likes and dislikes. I knew what helped her sleep at night. I knew how talented she was. I knew how much she committed herself to a challenge. Gwen should have known that I knew her best. But she was still growing, just like my mother once did. Everybody went through puberty. Everybody wanted to try new things. Everybody got into arguments. It wasn't like I didn't expect these fights. I just never really prepared for them. She would just have to trust me. She should have known that I knew her best. Gwen just needed to stick with it. She had the potential for greatness that my mother could only dream of. Everybody said it. Coaches, teachers, even parents of her friends. She was a star in everything she did. So why was she trying to push away the very things that made her great? The question kept repeating in my head, so I told myself that she was just being foolish, that it was the hormones talking. But I knew I'd hurt her, and I didn't want to lose her twice. They might act completely different right now, but she was all I had left of my mom. I crept to her bedroom and opened the door just a crack to see if she was still awake. Gwen's chest rose and fell steadily, so I pushed it open even farther. She looked so much like my mom that it hurt.
Every day I would see my mother in her more than the day before. She looked healthier, though, with fuller cheeks and twinkling eyes. It was what my mother should have looked like in her youth. I took another step closer, my eyes watering. The familiar pang in my chest had returned. "Mom, I miss you so much." Gwen's heavy breathing stopped. "I'm here, Stacy." I froze. Did I wake her up?
But the heavy breathing returned and the tension in my shoulders relaxed. Weird. Gwen had never sleep-talked before. She sounded like my mother. I could almost hear that familiar depth in her adult voice. I crouched beside her bed. Maybe I should let her try soccer. It could solidify her love for swimming if she tried a different sport and didn't like it. "Stacy," Gwen groaned. Her eyes remained closed. I reached out and cupped her smooth face. I could feel her heartbeat where my fingers rested beneath her ears. "I'm here, Gwen," I whispered. Her eyelids fluttered, but remained closed. "Stacy, baby, it's me, Mommy." I held back a sob. She sounded so much like my mom. Could it really be her? Was she speaking to me through little Gwen? "Mommy?" "Yes, Pumpkin." My mom had always called me Pumpkin. It was something reserved between us. As much as I missed her, I never told little Gwen about the nickname she'd once given me in her past life. I tried not to let Gwen know too much about my mother. I couldn't let her catch on. It would be too big of a shock, and I didn't want her to question her whole humanity, her very life. I wanted her to live like a normal person. "I've missed you so much, dear," she spoke again. Oh God, it really was my mom. How was this possible? Tears kept streaming down my face as I realized that I was speaking to her again. Somehow, I was here, talking to the one woman I would have done anything in the world for. I felt like a little girl. It was so good to hear her old voice one last time. I'd recorded her in her final days so that I could listen to her, but it was nothing compared to this moment. Her voice sounded so much stronger now. Older, but stronger. "I've missed you too." I couldn't tell if what I said was discernible between my hiccups. I was crying quietly to not wake Gwen up, but it was so hard. I let my tears fall onto the blanket beside her. "Now, honey, we don't have a lot of time. Gwen might wake up soon." "What do you mean?" "I need you to trust me on this, okay? Do you want to see me again?" I nodded vigorously. I would give anything to spend one last day with my mother again. "Yes, of course." "Where your hands are, do you feel that pulsing?" I paused. What I had mistaken for a heartbeat was actually something else entirely. There was something underneath your skin pushing from inside, like it was trying to get out. It moved at a steady pace, but it definitely wasn't natural. "Yes, Mom." It felt so good to address my mother again. I never thought I would be able to say it after she died.
"That's me. Can you feel me pushing?" I nodded, my breath hitching in excitement. I could feel her. I was only millimeters away from feeling my mother. This is going to sound strange, but you need to believe me. You know that I've never lied to you before, right? Okay. Gwen is a skin. They did more than just clone her. They put my soul inside of her too. I furrowed my brow. Skin? What do you mean? Gwen suddenly shifted, and I quickly drew my hand back towards my chest. My mother waited for her deep breathing to resume before she continued. It was never about cloning. They targeted people who had lost loved ones for a reason. They wanted to keep the body and the soul alive. They did more than you asked for, honey. They kept me alive too. I pinched myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming. It sounded unbelievable, but my mother wouldn't lie to me. But Gwen is nothing like you. She strays farther from who you were every day. Gwen is my shell, honey, but she is not me. I'm here, but Gwen and I are two separate beings. I lost track of time as my mother explained the situation. More than once, Gwen moved in her sleep, and every time she did, I feared that she would wake up and I would lose the chance to speak to my mother again. But my mom went on, explaining how Gwen was simply a vessel for her.
how inside her soul had drawn enough of little Gwen's cells and energy for her to begin growing inside of her clone. The company had done more than it had promised, honey. In fact, it had recreated life in a way that no other scientists were able to. They had reversed death. They had brought my mother back from the dead, all for a couple $100,000 in cold hard cash. It was a steal, honestly. It's getting tight in here. I'm going to need to be let out soon. Is there anything I can do to help, Mom? I couldn't stop saying it. I'll do whatever it takes, Mom. I tasted the words on my tongue. It felt so good. For a few moments, my mother didn't say anything. Mom? I asked again. This is going to be the hard part. I'll do it, Mom. I'll do anything to see you again. My heart raced with excitement.
I missed my mother so much. When I was a little girl, she always told me when I'd hurt her. She reminded me when I was being ungrateful. She'd teach me equality, to show that the pain from her blows were less than the pain she felt when I'd make a mistake. I still needed to make it up to her. I had hurt her with my mistakes, my failed tests, my petty complaints. So much of her pain and suffering had been caused by me, but I could fix it all now. My mother was so wise, but she was gone before she could teach me everything. There was still so much I could learn from her. I needed to see her again, to hear her voice and hold her hand. Little Gwen wasn't enough. She might have looked like her, but she was nothing like my mother. And I was so close to being back with her again. Some might have called it a big sacrifice when I did what I did. Others might have said it was a risk. But my mother was always right, so I had to listen. I would hurt anybody just to protect her. That's why when she told me to press a pillow against Gwen's face, I didn't protest. She said Gwen couldn't actually feel pain. When she told me to start cutting at Gwen's scalp, I listened again, slicing obediently until there was no skin left. All the struggle and blood was worth it when fingers protruded from flesh, eventually becoming arms, which became shoulders, and soon emerged the face of my mother. Her bones and joints cracked as she crawled out of her shell, but her movements were distinctly hers. She was so small, but she would continue to grow now that she had more space. A smile formed on my lips as I drank up the sight of her. I'd missed the mole on her lip and the slight hunch in her posture. Little Gwen didn't have those things. Standing before me was my mom, just as beautiful as I remembered. And that was all that I needed. Thank you, Stacy. You've made me proud. My heart soared as a smile bloomed across my face. It was all I had ever wanted to hear. When I was younger, she would offer her critiques to better me. I knew she wanted me to be the best version of myself, but in my teenage years, I'd resisted. Then I went to university and moved out, and I couldn't prove myself to her like I wanted to. Her harsh comments and painful strikes and blows all made up for this moment. I had finally done it. I'd made her proud, and all I had to do was listen. This is why I didn't protest against her, because my mother was always right. I'm posting this now for those of you that want to see your loved ones again. It's possible. I've found my happiness, and maybe you can too.
My ex-girlfriend called, asking for help. She wanted a ride home, but whatever I let in my car was not human anymore. Something strange happened that night when I was driving home. It was the same drive I took every night. I was working late and finally ready to leave. I waved goodbye to my coworker Jeff and said goodnight. My commute was only about half an hour. Not too bad, all things considered. Never much traffic either, just a couple of traffic lights and then straight down a country road. While I was driving out of the parking lot, I got a call. It was from my ex-girlfriend, Jessica. It was strange because she hadn't contacted me in almost a year. I was glad I got the call before I made it too far down the road where I lost service. Living out in the country sucks for reception,
and until I get home, I have no service. I pulled over and answered the call. Before I could even say hello, she cut me off, sounding genuinely scared. "Please, you need to help. I can't reach anyone else. I need you to pick me up at the Cypress Street bus station as soon as you can get here." I tried to respond, but the line went dead. I called her back asking what was going on, but she didn't pick up. I was surprised she would be calling me if she needed help, and confused why, if it was urgent or she was in danger, that she wouldn't call 911. I couldn't risk ignoring it though. If she really needed help, I had to do something. I turned around and took a detour down to Cypress Street to try and find her. I got there in good time and started searching for any bus stops until I found one. Sure enough, there she was. Jessica was sitting alone at the bus stop. She was wearing a large coat, but seemingly shivering out in the night. She was still seated and didn't appear to be in immediate danger. I pulled up to the curb by the bus stop and called out, "Jess?" At first, she didn't answer, and I was embarrassed I might have made a mistake. But then, suddenly, she turned towards me and had a strange, confused look, like she was just remembering something. She stood up and slowly walked over to my car. I was relieved it was her, and I called out again. "What's wrong, Jess? Did you just need a lift? I don't know if the red line comes through this late on a Thursday. Are you all right? You sounded really nervous earlier and wouldn't pick up when I called you back." She still looked confused, and I was worried something was wrong, but she suddenly smiled, as if remembering something that made her happy, and she regarded me. "Oh, thank you. I'm not sure how I got here. Please take me home."
Without another word, she shuffled over to the passenger side and let herself in. The way she moved seemed irregular, not quite like she was drunk, but just an odd, pained movement, like she might be hurt, yet her expression showed no signs of discomfort at all. The effect was a little jarring, and after she got in my car, I suddenly felt a bit unnerved. I brushed it off though. After all, we had dated for 3 years, and we knew each other pretty well. I figured maybe she was just having a bad night, or perhaps even a bit drunk, though I didn't smell anything on her. I tried to act casual and smiled. She returned the gesture in a strange half-smile, half-grimace. "So where to?" I asked again. She just sat there, still smiling faintly and looking at me, or rather, staring. She continued for nearly 30 seconds, and it felt like she was staring a hole into me. I cleared my throat and asked again, Jess? Jessica? Where did you need to go? What did you call me for?" "Oh, called you? I called you?" She paused, looking confused, then continued, "Home. Take me home with you. I need help." She looked like she was ready to cry, and my sympathy in the moment prevented me from considering how oddly she was acting, and the strange way she was speaking. I decided I would start heading home, and along the way, try to see what was really going on. We drove on for a while, and she didn't offer any details. She didn't talk about anything unless I asked her directly. She just alternated between staring outside, or worse, when she thought I wasn't looking at her, she would stare at me. The way she looked at me made me uncomfortable. We had spent so much time together, but whatever was wrong with her now made her look at me as if I were an alien she was studying. "What actually happened tonight, Jess? What's wrong? This is kind of strange, you calling me after all this time," I asked her honestly. She looked at me again, her head tilted, like a bird examining prey. Then she replied, I was attacked, caught. Someone caught me, hurt me. I will get help tomorrow, but tonight I just needed a face, a familiar face." I nodded my head and focused on the road. I missed my turn. I had a bad feeling about taking her home in this state. Something was off. As we drove on, she seemed to settle in and her head lolled back, almost like she was nodding off to sleep. I considered that she might have suffered a head injury or something, which would help explain the odd behavior. I thought it might be good to take her to a hospital just to have her checked out. She started making odd noises while I thought she was asleep. Strange hissing sounds that had to be intentional. I never heard someone snore like that before. I decided to turn around and start heading back into town. Either I could take her to the hospital or back to her own home. She stayed in the strange sleeping trance for a while. A few times I was worried because I couldn't hear her breathing anymore, but she suddenly exhaled and made more of those strange sounds. When I got back into town and my reception returned, I received a text, or rather a handful of them. I glanced at my phone quickly without wanting to take my eyes off the road for too long. I was confused when I saw they were from Jessica. I thought for a moment she might be pulling some prank where she pretends to be asleep and then messages me. I was curious how she could do that while looking like she was unconscious. I slowed down a little bit and confirmed the empty road, and then pulled up the messages just to see. What I read made my blood freeze. The first one came shortly after I picked Jessica up. "Where are you? Please, I need help. I can't say much, and you will think I'm crazy, but I can't go to the police. I just need to get out of here before it comes back. Something is after me. It looked like a cop earlier. I saw it again and I had to hide. It tried to kill me. After it attacked me, it changed. You have to believe me. It looks like me." The message ended and I read the next one. "I'm sorry, I don't know where it went. I don't see you here. Please hurry." I read the final message sent just a few minutes ago. "I need to leave. I hope you're okay. I'm sorry, I never should have asked you to come and get me tonight. I was just so scared. It's better if you stay away. It's not safe. Forget I called you. Don't come here. And if you see me waiting, turn away. I know it sounds insane, but it's not really me." I glanced over to the woman sleeping next to me. Her head was slumped forward, but her eyes were fluttering under her lids like REM sleep. I had no idea what was really happening, but if I wanted to believe Jess, then I had to accept that the person sitting next to me was not only not really her, but was a violent monster. Whatever was happening, I had to get her out of my car. I had an idea. I stopped at a gas station and she woke up as I was parking. She turned over, cracked her neck in an awkward stretch that sounded horrifically painful, but seemed not to cause her discomfort, and asked, "Are we home? I'm so hungry." I held my nerve and lied.
Yes, we are. I can get you something inside. Come on, let's go in, and I can get you a bite to eat. She scrutinized me, and for a second, I thought she could see through the ruse. But her head cocked, and she gave an unsettling smile. She slowly opened the car door and stepped out. She waited for me to get out, but I lunged across the seat and pulled the door closed and locked it. The fake smile faded, and my fear that this was just some trick had fully dissolved. What I saw next was something I can never unsee. As she raged outside, her face twisted into a nightmarish jumble of different human features, and an unholy noise emerged that sounded like 100 people screaming at once. She pulled so hard on the door that the handle broke off and part of it buckled. I was not sure that she wouldn't be able to rip the entire door off if she tried hard enough. I put the car in reverse and slammed on the gas, peeling out of there. I managed to turn around and drive away. I looked in my rearview mirror and, to my horror, the thing that had once looked like Jessica was right behind me, sprinting at nearly the speed of the car. The thing chased me for several blocks, moving so fast I was afraid she might actually catch up. I finally lost her, and I struggled to calm myself so I wouldn't crash. I was terrified, but I had so many questions. I called Jessica again, but she didn't answer. I was afraid something had happened to her. I even drove back to the bus stop, but as she had said in her message, she was gone. I didn't know what to do, so I finally drove home after going in a few circles around town and checking behind me at several intervals to make sure I wasn't followed. I kept trying to reach out to Jessica, but after several days, her voicemail was full, and after a week, I found out she had gone missing. I had a horrible feeling that whatever that thing was had caught up to her. I was devastated that she was gone, but also terrified that whatever it was knew who I was now too. I ended up moving away. I couldn't bear the idea of living near where such a thing existed. I couldn't find any information on what it was or how Jessica had found it, but all I knew was it was real and it was still out there. After enough time had passed, I felt a bit safer. I thought that since I had put enough distance between us, things would be all right. That all changed after the call I received last night. I got a message from a familiar number. It was my old coworker, Jeff. I asked him why he was calling, and he started laughing. "What do you mean? You said you would come over for the party. I saw you last night. You seemed a little drunk, but I figured you would remember agreeing to come over and say hi to everyone again. It's been so long, I just wanted to remind you to bring your own beer. See you there." He said goodbye, and I held the phone next to my ear in shock. The call had ended, and I was speechless. I sit here now terrified of what is happening back home. There's only one way they could have seen me there. That thing was back. It's there. It's hunting. I have to call and tell everyone. They have to believe me. They have to know that if they see me, it's not really me, and it's not safe.
I live on a survivalist compound, and the people are vanishing. The people are vanishing, and they're not being remembered. I'm the only person that seems to remember them in the first place. It's starting to get weird, and I just don't know where else to seek help than here. I'll give some context to where I live, and maybe that will shed some light onto the situation, or at least all the light that I've gathered thus far. Ever since I can remember, my parents had been worried about the end of the world and the breakdown of society as we know it. To the point on my 8th birthday, they had sprung the news that we were moving to a survivalist compound. My stable life that was filled with friends, school, and the typical childhood of any regular family were uprooted overnight. My parents had sold all our belongings and had made the trip to the compound. I can't give you an exact location, as I don't even completely know the exact location either. Heck, I'm writing this on an old laptop that I found in one of the missing people houses. I didn't steal it, because as far as Mrs. Gwaltney was concerned, her adult son had never existed. She didn't even blink when I had commandeered the old bag and a few other things from the room. My life inside the compound had been a staggering 12 years. Unlike a lot of the kids that were around my age, they had never left the compounds or the large mountainside that we resided in. To them, this living out here as recluses, completely detached from the outside world, was perfectly normal. I had always considered leaving and venturing out into the world, but what skills did I have to offer? Firearm proficiency, skilled at archery, skinning animals, and other survival skills? The only option I could see forward was a wildlife survival guide, but I don't want to be out in the woods anymore. I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but I had grown close to the people inside of the community. It was my hobby and pastimes to get to know new members and old members alike. They all were different and unique, and it was an easy way to get out of intensive training. Either way, I can't remember the first time someone had vanished, but I do remember the day that I noticed that people were gone, poofed out of people's memories as if they were nothing more than a figment of my imagination. I'd learned the hard way when I had raised a fuss when I noticed my best friend was missing. Tabitha, or Tab for short. She was one of the kids that I had grown up with. Even though Tab had been born on the compound, she was a curious soul and someone that I could confide in. Just like the 3 other people now that had gone missing, no one blinks an eye. It's as if they're nothing more than a figment of my own imagination.
The looks I'm getting are enough to make me feel like I'm losing my mind, but I'm going to get to the bottom of it. I owe it to Tab to find out the truth. For now, I've been collecting things from those that have vanished. Let me start from the day that Tab vanished. If I retrace the day, maybe we'll be able to figure something out. It was a humid day, early July. The sun was just peeking over the far mountaintop. I had climbed up to the roof of my house and was watching the sunrise. The community hadn't completely woken up, but from my vantage point, I could see a few people moving about.
They were the community, typically early risers. Mr. Jones, Margaret, the twins, and Mother Isabella, each of them heading off to do their jobs. Mr. Jones managed the electricity for the community. The twins were his apprentices. Meanwhile, Margaret was off to get breakfast prepared. Today was Communion Day, meaning that the whole community would gather for breakfast, and then morning mass as held by Mother Isabella. She and her husband, the late Father Mark, had established the community, building it from 4 families into a massive town with probably close to 200 people residing on the mountainside. Bidding on the jerky that I had taken from the pantry, I happened to catch the eyes of Mother Isabella. Her golden hazel eyes swung upwards to meet mine. A shudder ran down my back. It was uncanny how she always seemed to notice me. Mother Isabella's mouth stretched into a warm smile. It even reached all the way to her eyes. Her full mouth was spread in a dazzling smile. I felt my heart pound in my chest a little faster. She had been young when I had arrived, 12 years ago, probably no older than 19, and she had been married to the late father, who had to be well into his late 50s. It had always seemed strange that they were a married couple, especially given the fact that Mother Isabella didn't seem to care for her husband. To outside eyes, she was as pious a wife as one could get, but I remember catching her laughing after his funeral last summer. He'd pass away due to some disease. My parents had whispered about cancer and the thyroid, about it being too far gone to do anything about. Mother Isabella had thought she was alone, but I'd seen her behind the recreation shed. Her beautiful face wasn't a mask of sadness as it had been earlier during the ceremony. No, she'd been laughing and smiling as she cursed his name. I had been so startled I knocked over a bucket as her piercing eyes had found me. Relief flooded them the minute she saw it was me. Even now, her words echoed in my head. Winnie. My name sounded like a prayer on her lips. You wouldn't tell anyone about this, would you? She tilted her head, letting the caramel brown locks of hair slide over her shoulder. It whispered across her face almost like a lover's caress. My mouth felt like lead. I didn't know how to respond. Once I understood the massive age difference between the two of them, I'd been grossed out. But I couldn't speak about it. I'd asked my parents about it, and my father had flown into a massive speech, while my mother just sat there and nodded her head like a wooden doll. That had been the last time I voiced my thoughts to them. I gave Mother Isabella a curt nod, and she kept beaming. Moving towards me, she had gently cut my cheek and given me a light kiss on the forehead. It'll be our little secret. Her breath was sweet like flowers. The scent seemed to wrap itself around me. It had made my stomach swim. Ever since then, my eyes had followed her. She had become the de facto leader of the community. Father Mark had been its leader, but now that I watched everyone, she had always been the leader. Her husband had just been the figurehead.
Biting my finger, I couldn't help but break eye contact with her first. Standing, I stretched my back as I gathered my notebook into my backpack. Double-checking that I had my trusty knife in my boot, I patted my hip and found the other one as well. Opening the smaller zipper on my backpack, I saw it there, sitting like a rock inside the bag. A gun. It's not something that you're supposed to carry inside the compound unless you were part of the peacekeepers. I could get into some serious trouble for keeping it on my person. But I was a rule breaker, always had been. I think it disappointed my parents, but there wasn't much they could do. Everyone in the community viewed me as a helpful daughter, sister, or friend. One had to keep up illusions if you wanted to subvert a close-knit community. Plus, my own parents, even if they were mildly disappointed in me, weren't the type to invite criticism onto themselves. Clambering down the safety ladder that went down from the 3-story home that I lived in, I hit the ground with a soft thump. The ground here on the side of the house wasn't paved. The main streets and those that led to the front entrance and back entrance of the compound were all paved. The pathways that led to the houses were outlined with stone. Glancing at the front of the driveway, I noticed that the Jeep that normally resided there was nowhere to be seen. It looks like Dad had taken it out, maybe on an assignment from Mother Isabella and the council. Rolling my eyes, I just moved onwards, looking left and right down the small alleyway that separated the houses. I quickly moved between the houses. Slowly but surely, the lights from the other houses began to click on. People were waking, and soon we'd all be expected at Mass. Making a sharp left, I arrived at the back of Tab's houses. My eyes roved the backyard looking for her, but she wasn't outside. Normally, I had arrived to find her in her hammock, her trusty brown beaten notebook open and her scrawling her thoughts inside of it. Reaching up, I undid the latch to the fence that was around Tab's backyard. Moving swiftly forward, I didn't move to the back door that was washed in light, the sound of humming floating in the air. It had to be Tab's mother, Monica. She was always humming something. Not wasting any more time, I ran to the ladder that was also attached to the side of Tab's house. It wasn't as well kept as my family's ladder. That was in part because Tab's family's house was older. The house had sprawling ivy that climbed upwards and moss that had started to grow in other places. The shutters on the windows were a faded red that was closer to a dirt auburn from years of the elements abusing it. I easily scaled the ladder, reaching the secondary floor without issue. I reached up and rapped my knuckles across of Tab's window. Sometimes she stayed up too late and didn't get to sleep till early. I figured this much be the case. Knock, knock, knock. The rasp of my knuckles was quick and concise. I didn't want to alert Monica that I was here. Even if most people liked me in the community, Monica always thought that I might be a bad influence on her daughter, given the fact that I was born on the outside.
Tab, wake up, I half whispered, half yelled as I knocked. Her curtains were drawn, and I tried rattling the window, trying to draw it upwards, but it was locked. Tab rarely locked her windows. Heck, no one really locked the windows in the community. Most people didn't even bother with locking the doors. Everyone here was in some weird way family. There was no crime. Well, crime that was punishable with jail time. Given anything that involved a close-knit community that was secluded, there were loos with problems. I'm sure you can understand the meaning of that. Tabitha, I know you don't sleep that deeply. Wake up and let me in. Your mom is going to see me and throw a fit. I pressed, leaning in close to the glass, straining my ears to see if I could hear her laughing. But there was nothing. Leaning back, I reached for the knife that was on my hip. It was the first knife that my father had given to me. It was also the first gift that I had received here in the community. He insisted that it was important for me to become accustomed to using a blade. A kabar, not any old one either, but one that my grandfather had owned, and then passed down to my father, and then to me. It was maliciously cared for, and a good companion for many situations. Slipping the blade underneath the worn wood of the window frame, I began to wiggle it forward until I felt the latch. Smiling, I pushed it forward and heard the click as the knife flipped the lock. Not wasting any time, I palmed the window frame and dragged it upwards. It went without fuss, and the room of my best friend came into sight. Her messy room full of paper and pencils, along with other arts and crafts that were clumsily placed throughout the room. My eyes quickly jumped to her bed, but when they landed, I found that the bed was empty. The covers weren't even ruffled. It didn't appear as if the bed had even been slept in. Tab, I called in a hushed whisper, trying not to be too loud, but loud enough that if she was in the room, she would be able to hear me. I waited for a few beats, but no response came. Not even a marker or pen falling from her trying to keep up the game. I frowned. Quickly, I pulled the window down and scampered back down the ladder. Not wasting any time, I marched to the back door. I could still hear Monica humming away. As I climbed the stairs up the back porch, Monica came into focus. She was drinking a cup of tea while flipping through a book. Her long, salt and pepper-colored hair was held loosely together in braids. Sucking in a deep breath, I rasped my knuckles across the glass. Turning, she tilted her head to look at me for a moment
before she stood up. Pulling the sliding door back, she regarded me. "Hi, I'm sorry it's so early, but is Tabitha here?" "Tabitha?" Monica questions. "She was supposed to meet me. We had some things that we needed to take care of before morning mass," I quickly explained, all the while lying through my teeth. Yes, we had plans, but it wasn't something that I would ever tell her mother. Normally, it was apologizing for being out late and not explaining why that had happened.
Winnie, honey, are you feeling all right? Monica asked me. Her voice was strange, almost kind, as if she was worried about me. I blinked before nodding my head. Yeah, I feel great. So is Tabitha in the bathroom, or did she leave with Lake? I asked, again trying to stay on topic. Monica blinked slowly at me, as if I was asking her a hard question. Her whole body language read as if she was debating on whether she should call someone for help. I smiled, trying to be as polite as possible in case Tab was in some real hot water with her mother. Who are you talking about? I blinked, looking at Monica, who wore an expression that was dead serious. In the first place, she wasn't the type to jokes like this, and secondly, she was giving me that smile. You know, the one that you give to someone who's a little slow on the uptake and that you think is crazy. Maybe she had gotten a little stronger supplement from the doc. I tried again, this time explaining who Tabitha was to her. Tabitha, your daughter. She looks more like her father than you. You both have a bit of a tough love mother-daughter relationship. Winnie, do you want me to have Lake take you to see Doc? You haven't been climbing again, have you? Remember, he said that you should be careful. Concussion can be really nasty, she said softly, talking to me as if I'm a wounded animal. Are you sure you don't need me to take you? How could you not know who I'm talking about? Lake, Monica called, turning her head to me as she called for Tabitha's older brother. Are we seriously doing this right now? I asked, venom leaking into my words. This was ridiculous. I had half the mind to tell her off and leave. I'd just go and check our normal hangout spots to see if Tabitha was there. She ignored my question. Her face was a mask of fake kindness. Uncomfortable was the word that I would use as we stood there, the question lingering in the air like a bad scent. The sound of pounding footfalls could be heard as he came down the stairs. Then, appearing not even a minute after his mom had yelled for him, came the golden child, the pride and joy of Tab's family, Lake, her older brother. Winnie? He asked as he looked over his mother's shoulders. Lake was tall and handsome, if you were into that sort of thing. He had chestnut-colored hair that had natural highlights, and he was the best at nearly everything. We'd also briefly dated, and it had ended less than cordially. I shook my head and took a step back from the two of them. This was crazy, and frankly, not something that I had expected from Monica. I knew that she didn't like me, but this was odd, acting as if she didn't know who I was talking about. Did she think Lake would go along with her little joke? Lake, where is Tabitha? He blinked slowly at me, his eyes glossing over before he seemed to come back to reality, a look of pure confusion on his face. Who's Tabitha? He asked. My stomach dropped through the floor. He had the same confused and concerned expression as Monica. It was as if they didn't know who I was talking about. Stop joking around. Tabitha as in your sister, I said, completely exasperated as I took another step back. He stepped in front of his mom, concern for me now coloring his face. Winnie, there's no one here named Tabitha. And a sister? You know that I don't have any siblings. He reached a hand out and tried to touch my shoulder. Another shudder ran up my spine as I dodged his hands. Only child? I nearly stuttered.
Of course, it's why we got along so well, he said, rather sheepishly. My mouth went dry as the gears in my head turned sharply. Blake truly believed that he was an only child. I turned to look at Monica. My stomach swam as I tired not to be sick. The same look was on her face. This isn't funny. If you're playing a joke on me, I really need you to stop now. What about her room upstairs? Can you explain why you have a room full of girls' clothes upstairs? I snapped, feeling the thin strand of sanity that I had. He held my stare, his eyes searching mine. After not finding what he was apparently looking for, he released a breath. Retracting his hand, he rubbed his neck as if he was trying to think through this as well. Mom, why don't you call Winnie's parents? He was still looking at me as if I was the crazy one talking about his sister, my best friend, as if she didn't exist in the first place. Okay, Monica said quietly, almost a whisper as she turned away from us and headed into the house. I'm not crazy. You have a sister named Tabitha, who is 2 years younger than you and loves to read and write. You'd always make fun of her, and she absolutely hated it when we started dating a year ago. She baked me a cake for breaking up with you. My mouth moved before my brain, dumping out information. Anything that I could think of would jog his memory. He stared at me blankly, almost pitifully. "Don't look at me like that," I screamed. It was loud to my own ears. He winced at my tone, but held up his hands in almost defeat. "Fine, let's go look at the room then," he acquiesced. We ascended the stairs. I noticed that the family pictures in their frames only held 3 people in the picture. My mouth went dry at that. Tabitha wasn't there. It was as if the pictures had been taken without her. The walk upstairs was quiet, and the rising dread bubbled up in my stomach. It felt like I was walking towards a grave rather than a room. Lake's form was tall and blocked most of my vision as we made our way. But we arrived at the room, and he pushed the door open. A breath left my mouth before I could stifle it. The room was devoid of Tab's things. There were a few boxes and a bed that was stripped of all personality. How is this even possible? I was just knocking at her window with everything inside. Reality slapped me in the face as I took it in. It was as if she had never been here. Lake stepped aside, giving me a better view, but I thought I might be sick. "It's an empty storage room. Be honest with me. Did you take something?" he asked, voice low as he turned to look down at me. My body shook as I tried to wrap my head around this reality, but I couldn't accept it. I wouldn't accept it. My friend was real, but her own family didn't remember her. "Bin," he begged, his tone cajoling like one would coax a child with. There would be none of this. I had to go. No, I needed to get out. Turning, I moved towards the stairs, picking up speed as I went. He was behind me, his voice ringing out. Words were just sounds as the roar of my own thoughts came crashing over me. I thought about leaving through the back door, but then I'd come across Monica. Reaching the end of the stairs, I threw open the door and quickly raced out of the house. Lake followed me for a bit, but then gave up. I was fast, and when I didn't want to be caught, I was even faster. I skipped morning mass and hid out in our secret treehouse.
It was something that we had put together over the years. Climbing the ladder, I threw open the makeshift door, and there was no one in there. My heart sank, but I noticed the Polaroids that we'd taken. Tab had begged her father to get the simple camera, and he finally did. Reaching out, I yanked one of the pictures from the wall. She was still in the Polaroids. My heart hammered in my chest as the face of my smiling best friend came into focus. Tears ran down my cheeks. I sat there for a while, holding the photos, collecting them all from the walls. Whatever had gotten to her house and their pictures hadn't managed to get here. It was only me and Tab who knew about our secret spot. I'd collected all the pictures and scribblings and hid them in my backpack. The sun was starting to set when I finally decided to make my way back to the compound. I sunk in through a hole in the wall by the western entrance. That night, my father had scolded me something fierce about making a scene, while my mother just sat on and watched the whole thing. When I had asked them if they remembered Tabitha, their expressions had gone slack, almost like a chicken that had stunned itself. But their response had been nearly identical to Tab's family. "Winnie, are you sick? You don't have a friend named Tabitha," Dad said, matter-of-factly. He'd shaken his head, glancing at my mother, who also looked confused. "I'm not sick. None of you seem to remember her," I snapped. "Wilhelmina," he snapped, "don't take that tone with me." I snapped my mouth shut. He rubbed the spot between his eyebrows. His salt and pepper hair looked unruly. He exhaled and fixed me with his eyes. They were hard as he spoke, although I can't remember a time in recent history where he hasn't looked at me with the disapproving stare. "Go upstairs. I have enough to deal with already. The last thing I need is you causing made-up drama." I opened my mouth to speak, but he shot me a stare that made me close my mouth. I'd almost been tempted to show him the pictures, to prove a point that I wasn't sick or crazy or anything else he was thinking. But I'd decided against that, the reality of my situation dawning on me. If her own family can't remember her, then mine surely wouldn't be any better. I'd gone upstairs, and that night I hadn't slept. Honestly, most nights since that night I hadn't really slept. Fear was my fuel as I thought about being snatched up in the night.
In those half sleep-deprived and half manic nights, I had come up with a plan. I'd pretended that what happened that day was from a concussion and that I hadn't been in my right mind. The lie was bitter on my tongue, but it had done its job. Everyone had accepted it. But others started to vanish. I'd begun keeping a registry of everyone that was in the compound, keeping a date by everyone that had vanished and the last time I had seen them. It was hard because when I'd snuck into the office to get the official town registry, it was altered. Not like someone had taken a pen and scratched through people's names. They were completely erased, as if they hadn't been there to start with. Plus, everyone been acting strange. There are more morning masses and people are moving around more in the evenings. I plan to investigate more around the compound and try to figure out what's happening to everyone. This is a documentation that I exist in case I get removed from everyone's memories. But for now, I plan to investigate some tunnels I found the other day outside the compound. I'd found some tracks that lead into them. I'll let you know what I find when I get back.
The God in the Corner. I have been a teacher for years now. It's some kind of unspoken rule that every year there will always be a kid that is weird. The level and variety of weirdness vary, from benign to outright dangerous. My first year as a teacher, we had a student bring in a Stanley cup filled with gasoline that he poured in the boys' bathroom toilets and set them on fire. His reasoning: the bathrooms always smelled bad, and if the toilets were gone, they would have to remodel the whole thing. And he wasn't wrong about either of those things. He did get expelled, though, and avoided jail through what I assume was a very expensive lawyer. After that, we banned water that wasn't in clear bottles. My second year was a girl who had an odd obsession with breaking into lockers and leaving rocks inside them. The third year, we had a boy who would walk up behind people and scream into their ears when they weren't expecting it. He got punched a lot before his parents found him a good therapist. Then, in my fourth year, I had a new student, Simon Lynch, who all the incoming freshmen agreed was weird, but so far he's relatively benign. He also has some of the best grades in the school. He's helpful and kind, and even has a small group of friends he hangs out with. In class, he's an angel. The weirdness comes from the fact that he keeps talking about the God in the corner. He mentioned it in passing, even to me. He talks about this God so nonchalantly that you can almost dismiss it, like it's something he saw in a movie or read about in a book. I don't think anyone gave it any mind when he started talking about it. But the thing is, he never stopped talking about it. When there was a test, he would remind the other students in the class that if they made an offering to the God in the corner, they'd pass with flying colors. And apparently, the power of this God didn't stop at getting good grades. It helped with passing your driver's test, for helping you get rid of acne and lose weight and heal your dog's seizures. Nothing was too big or too small for the God in the corner. It was getting annoying, and I'd had to intervene and remind him that the classroom wasn't a place for religious talk. It's all right, Miss Quinn. It's not a religion, more like a cosmic force. I don't think you can actually pray to the God in the corner, just give it things, he said with a small smile. After that, the talk of the God went quiet. There weren't any tests coming up. Then Shannon Berber came in one day, whispering to the other students that the God in the corner was real, and even better, it worked.
Shannon had always had thick glasses. She was actually legally blind, and her eyesight was predicted to only get worse. But she had listened to Simon, and faced with nothing to lose, had made an offering to the God. And it hadn't even been a lot. Apparently, the God was satisfied with whatever you gave it, as long as it was sincere and something that meant something to you. It didn't want blood or your firstborn or anything so cliche. Shannon had made it a pie, a gooseberry pie, and a framed canvas of her own artwork. It had been a watercolor she'd made in class and been particularly proud of. She had placed these things in the corner, called the God, and gave it her wish, and the offerings had been taken, and her eyes had been fixed that night. It was a miracle, for lack of a better word. I had never seen Shannon so happy. Her eyes were large and lovely, a clear hazel green that I had never been able to properly see. After that, talk of the God in the corner became more commonplace. One of the worst students in my class, Maxwell Hardy, suddenly started getting straight A's. Another girl, Emily Stillway, got a full-ride scholarship to her dream school. For some other students, they grew taller, got thinner, had better skin. Some even developed athletic abilities seemingly overnight. It was weird, and surely it was all a coincidence. It had to be. And then my boyfriend Kyle got in a car wreck. He had been driving home when another driver, who was too busy texting to drive properly, T-boned him at an intersection. He was lucky to be alive at all, but he was in a coma, and there was no hope of him waking up, or him even living past the end of the week. I called Simon that evening. We're not supposed to call students, but I knew where to find his personal information, and I called his cell. My heart was pounding as I dialed the numbers. "Hello?" Simon asked from the other end of the line. "Simon, it's Miss Quinn, your teacher from school," I stammered out. "I know your voice, Miss Quinn. I think I know why you're calling. I heard about your boyfriend. Do you want to know how to make an offering to the God in the corner?" he asked with certainty. "Yes," was all I said back. "It's easy, Miss Quinn. All you need is a corner somewhere in your house, or any building will do. It must be dark. There must be a shadow, just enough that you can't see the corner anymore. And then you give it something that's personal to you, something that's of sentimental value, or something you made. Even a pie will do. Did you know Ryan Blair sang a song to the God in the corner? Something he wrote himself, and now he's the best player on the basketball team," Simon said conversationally. "What do I say? What do I say to get the God to come?" I asked, my voice trembling.
You say out loud, "This is an offering to the God in the corner." Then you say what your wish is, and then the God takes the offering and it's all over. Oh, the most important part. Don't try to take a photo of the God, or record it in any way, or turn on the light and reveal what's in the corner. There are consequences to that, you know, Simon explained. "What happens if I do that?" I asked, fear creeping into my voice. "Well, my uncle did that once. We never saw him again. I think he might still be alive, but honestly, isn't that scarier than being dead? The dead don't suffer," Simon said, so matter-of-factly that it sent a shiver down my spine. "Thank you, Simon. That's all I needed to know," I said in a rush. "You're welcome, Miss Quinn. I'll see you in class," Simon said, then ended the call. I sat there for a few minutes, genuinely contemplating what I was thinking of doing. I'd already crossed the line by calling a student like I did just now. Was I really this desperate to try to give an offering to some kind of god that lived in a corner? I was. I couldn't lose my Kyle if there was even a slim possibility of saving him. But I had no idea what to offer it. I was not an artist or a musician. I could barely cook, and I wasn't sure if the god in the corner would be satisfied with scrambled eggs and mac and cheese. Then it hit me. I did have something to offer it, something of great sentimental value. I dropped to my knees and reached under the bed, pulling out a lockbox that held the few valuables I owned, plus important documents. I opened it and pulled out an old wristwatch. It was my father's watch, and it had been my grandfather's watch before that. My dad had died when I was a teenager, and one of the few things that he had passed down to me. It was too sentimental for me to wear on a daily basis, but I would take it out occasionally to hold it and think of my dad. My heart dropped as I held it. It really was the item I treasured most in the world, but I would give it up if it meant saving someone that I loved. I looked up and locked eyes with the corner of the bedroom farthest from the bed. The light always had a hard time reaching it. I stood up and quickly switched the ceiling light off. It plunged half the room into near darkness, and the corner itself was now completely black. I edged closer to the corner, feeling a mix of fear and hopeful anxiety. I lay the watch down at the edge of the shadow.
I swallowed hard and started to speak. "This is an offering to the God in the corner. Please heal my boyfriend Kyle and make him as healthy and whole as he was before the accident," I said timidly. A few seconds passed and lots of conflicting emotions raced through my brain. Did I need to speak louder? Maybe the offering wasn't good enough. Or the more likely explanation was that this was all insane and my student played a vile joke on me when I wasn't in my right mind.
And then the shadows shifted. I gasped, falling backwards so I was flat on my backside. 2 arms emerged from the shadows. A scream caught in my throat and I clasped my hand over my mouth. The arms were long, far longer than a person's arm could possibly be. The flesh was a dark ashen gray, not black. The hands were long and the fingers delicate, almost feminine. Short, dark fingernails that glimmered sharply in the dim light caught my eye. The hands moved slowly and purposefully. They plucked the watch up and turned it to the shadow, as if a face I couldn't see was taking stock of the offering. I heard a faint murmur, a whisper that sounded pleased, and then the arms, hands, and the watch retracted into the shadows, like a rock disappearing into a lake after it's thrown in. I screamed then, a small, pathetic sound as I ran from the room. I stood shaking in my living room as I tried to process what I had just seen, what I had just done. I didn't go back into the bedroom that night. I didn't need to. I wasn't sure how much time had passed, probably no more than 20 minutes, when my phone rang. It was Kyle's mom. "Maddie! Maddie, you need to come to the hospital right now!" His mom practically screamed over the phone. "Oh God, what's happened? Is Kyle dead?" I sobbed, fearing the answer. No, he's awake and he's okay, and he's asking for you," she shouted back. Kyle was healed. It was nothing short of a miracle. Kyle was being held as a medical marvel, and the doctors promised that studies would be done on him in the future. I took him home a few days later. He was the same old Kyle, though he did tease me now about why I wanted the lights on in the bedroom, and why I always stared at corners now. We got engaged not long afterwards, and married. We even started our own family. Simon continued to be a good student. He graduated from high school as a valedictorian and got a full scholarship to a very prestigious university. Even that was years ago, and I see Simon's name on the news now. He started a new tech company that people are saying will be the next Tesla. In the photos I've seen of him, he looks handsome and self-assured, and it always leaves me wondering, what is the extent of the power of the God in the corner?
I asked my childhood friend what happened during our sleepover 20 years ago. I wish I hadn't. I don't like sleeping with my back to open spaces anymore. To be honest, I don't know if I ever truly loved it, but I especially can't stand it now. Have you ever turned around because you swore someone was behind you? That dreadful, heavy feeling fills your stomach, while the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. The tingling in your spine as you can practically feel fingers reaching out to caress the nape of your neck. It's unsettling. And even as I sit outside of this busy cafe, I still feel that chill deep in my bones. I've been tossing and turning at night, trying to work through what I found out about that sleepover all those years ago, and I honestly can't come to terms with it. My therapist, God bless her, recommended I write it out so my brain can work through what I'm feeling. She's seen me at the lowest points in my life, and she's always done her best to let me process through my emotions without guiding me. She said I'm the type of person that needs to see from all angles before I can truly accept something, so this is my attempt to do just that. Maybe as you are reading through what I'm writing, you'll recognize these feelings, and maybe I won't feel so alone. I guess let's start from the beginning. I met Joanna when I was 10 years old, And now, 24 years later, he's still one of my best friends. I still remember every detail of the day she came crashing into my life. She is vibrant, a technicolor soul who lives her life cranked up to 11 at all times. I was a shy, gawky kid, the only brown-skinned child in a town full of families so old the roads and cemeteries were named for them. To put it bluntly, I was an outsider, and most people never let me forget that. What's that old saying? There's nothing as cruel as school children? During one particularly harrowing day, I remember walking through the halls with my head down and colliding right into Joanna. I stumbled backwards, shocked out of my reverie and embarrassed I hadn't seen her in time, and she stood there looking at me with her mouth agape, her face twisted in a mix between disgust and confusion. Her eyes scanned mine, darting back and forth and then down to the bundle of books in my hands. I began chewing my lip, trying to will my tongue to form an apology, but being stared at so fiercely had me rooted to my spot. She raised her little hand up high. I was sure she was going to strike me, and I braced for the inevitable impact. Thwap! She brought her hand down fast and quick, knocking the books out of my hands, my papers and textbooks clattering loudly to the linoleum floor.
She stared at me again, and I was trying my hardest not to make direct eye contact, my gaze bouncing between the puke green lockers and the glittery posters that peppered the hallway, marketing the annual yearbook sale. I could feel tears welling up in my eyes, hot and threatening to pour over my lids, when suddenly she started laughing, doubling over as a heavy, deep laugh took over her entire body. She rocked back and forth as it consumed her like a wave until nothing but tiny squeaks came out of her mouth. She wiped her eyes and took deep gasps of breath, straightening up and making eye contact with me again. She hiccuped between her final chuckles. "I'm so sorry. Your face, that was too funny. Here, let me help you." I stood there, rooted with a mixture of fear, anger, and confusion filling my body. What the hell was happening? I stared at this small girl, her long brown hair braided into two twin pigtails that swayed as she laughed. Even though I had always been tall for my age, she was noticeably shorter than I was, with her little rotund face peppered with a sea of freckles. Her mouth took up most of her face, her big lips splayed in a giant grin as she kept muttering to herself, "Ah, that's so stupid," as she bent over to pick up my scattered school supplies. She glanced up at me, her small brown eyes crinkled with the remnants of her previous laughter. "Aren't you gonna pick your stuff up? Don't be a litter bug." "Litter bug?" I snorted, the anger outweighing the embarrassment I had previously felt. I'm not a litter bug. You slapped me." "Actually, I slapped your books. It was to wake you up. I mean, you crashed right into me." She chuckled, shrugging her shoulders as if to highlight the absurdity of the entire situation. "Well, I guess I was driving under the influence of my thoughts?" I smiled down at her slightly. Her eyes sparkled like her soul was recognizing mine, and that big grin swallowed her face whole again. "Ah, that's funny. You're funny." She scooped all my belongings back into her arms and stood up, plopping them into mine. "I'm Joanna. What's your name?" I stood, half stunned, half amused, a small smirk creeping across my thin lips. "I'm Arcadia, but you can call me Katie."
Joanna stood and observed me. It felt like being put under a microscope, and as she scanned me, I made small observations of her as well. As she perceived my mess of dark, unruly hair, I noticed how cool her mauve pinafore dress looked. She had pins and buttons attached to the front of it with sayings like, "Gag me with a spoon," and "Did I do that?" with Urkel glasses underneath. I crossed my red and white sneakers in a pigeon step, embarrassed at how dorky I must have looked to the coolest girl I had ever met. She stood straight, her untied boots adding at least 2 inches to her short stature. "That is," she started, drumming her multicolored fingernails against her chin.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the coolest name I've ever heard. You're cool, and you're funny. I like you. Let's be friends. Suddenly, she thrust her arm in between mine, snaking it around and holding on to me like we had been friends forever. That was the day Joanna Collins adopted me into her life. I wasn't just an awkward kid anymore. I was her new best friend. We were inseparable, two peas in a radical little pod. Joanna shared all her favorite songs with me, and she sung with every ounce of gusto in her heart. I felt like knowing her meant truly knowing myself, and all those weird little quirks about myself I felt like I had to hide felt like something to celebrate for the first time. The days fell away in a flurry of laughing fits, eating entirely too much sour candy, and of course, picking up my books anytime she slapped them out of my hands. We spent every holiday, every weekend, every summer together. I took trips with her family to their lake house, where we would ride inflatable tubes pulled behind much too fast boats. We would scream and laugh as we launched high into the air, eventually crashing hard at night with the scent of sunscreen and barbecue lingering on our skin. She would snicker and make faces at me through the curtain of her hair as we bent over in prayer during church service with my family. That's what I miss most about those days, how easily we laughed. The summer we turned 12, after celebrating our birthdays, we were hanging out in her upstairs foyer when things started to change. "Did I ever tell you," Joanna started, fidgeting with the beads of the friendship bracelet that she was making, "that you're a giant idiot? I mean, I knew that from the first day I met you. It's basically a terminal condition, but I love you all the same." I responded back, not even looking up from my own tangle of purple and green threads. "No, ass," she chuckled. "Did I ever tell you I can sense things?"
Like what? I questioned, finally looking up and noticing she was looking off into the distance. "It's hard to describe," she said quietly, a serious look furrowed across her brows. "It's like I can sense things. Like I can feel what other people are feeling even if I'm not with them. It's like I can sense things before they happen." I stared at her blankly. She was chewing the bottom corner of her lip and still staring off. She turned to look at me, her eyes searching mine for understanding. I remember that when I look back, like she was pleading for me to understand something that was much bigger than I could comprehend as a preteen. You can sense things?" I asked, pausing, my face twisting up. "Yeah, I can sense things," she said matter-of-factly. I squinted my eyes and my face turned red as I squeezed to let out the most pathetic little fart. "Could you sense that?" I asked before rolling over and laughing, my arms twitching above me like a dead bug. I remember she didn't laugh, and that caught me off guard. I remember actually feeling ashamed, like I could feel the temperature of the room change, like her disappointment dropped the air by 2 degrees. I quickly stopped laughing and rolled back over onto my stomach. I looked up at her sheepishly. "Oh, hey, I'm sorry. Not everything is a joke, you know," Joanna said quietly. "Oh, Jojo," I started, getting up to my knees. This is something serious. Nobody ever takes me seriously. My own mother thinks I'm crazy. But it scares me sometimes." In the years I had known Joanna, I had seen almost every side of her. The clown, the studious one, the lover girl, the soldier, but I don't think I had ever seen her afraid like this. She was fearless, and until that point in our lives, I had only ever known that version of her. I remember the breath catching in my chest, like I was watching the mask of her facade crack slightly. Was I a terrible friend? How could I not have seen the delicate web of splinters before? "Is it happening again?" I asked, taking her hand into mine gently. I wanted her to know I was here with her. "It's crazy. I mean, I'm not crazy, but it's spooky. Pulling her hand from mine and began fidgeting with her long brown hair. "Do you remember last year when my Nana died?" I thought back, recalling that rainy weekend in November of last year when we were lying around in Joanna's room listening to music. We were singing along to Dashboard Confessional when suddenly Joanna stopped singing abruptly. The hairbrush microphone she had been holding in her hands mere moments ago clattered to the floor, and she stood rigidly still. All the color drained from her face, and she crumpled to her knees on her bed. I noticed her out of the corner of my eyes while I was hitting a high note and turned to look at her, Dude, what's wrong? I said, concerned. She stared straight ahead, not even seeing me. Her lip began quivering, and she said, "Please don't get in the car." Almost like a whisper.
Those aren't the lyrics. Are you okay, dude? I waved my hand in front of her eyes, but she still looked straight ahead, like she was looking through the walls and beyond to something greater. Her eyes began to well up with tears, and her breathing became shallow and shuddering. I looked down at her hands. Her nails were digging into the soft meat of her thighs. "Stop! Go back, please!" Her face twisted in pain, her eyes squinting as if pleading with some unseen entity. "What the I whispered, standing in front of Joanna now with my face inches from hers, searching her blank expression for any answer. Joanna! Joe! I screamed in her face, shaking her slightly. She snapped to, the pained look replaced with confusion and annoyance. "Ow, bitch! Talk much? Why are you yelling in my face?" She looked at me quizzically, sneering slightly. Her face softened when she saw how spooked I was. "Is there something on my face?" she joked. "What the hell was that?" I exasperatedly yelped at her. "You just scared the shit out of me, dude." "What happened?" she asked, oblivious to the psychotic show she had just put on. "Well, Freakazoid, you stopped singing and you just dropped. You were looking out at God knows what in the distance and muttering about not getting into the car. None of this is ringing any bells?" I asked, my hands flailing wildly to showcase my exasperation. No? I think you're making stuff up, dude. Maybe you've had too many sour gummy worms." Joanna stood back up and brushed some blanket fuzz off her knees, noticing the red crescent shapes in her thigh where her fingernails had pierced the skin. "Damn it," she muttered. "How did I scratch myself?" "Ugh." She shrugged and tossed her hair back over her shoulders, picking up her hairbrush and getting ready to belt out the next song on the CD. I stood in the middle of the room, staring in utter confusion. What the fuck had I just seen? What on earth was that? Soon, the incident was a distant thought as the rest of the night continued on in a flurry of normal sleepover shenanigans before it was time for bed. I remember curling up in bed across from her that night, my feet at her head and hers at mine. As the hours ticked on, Joanna snored softly at my feet, but sleep eluded me. I remember staring at the bright neon of Joanna's alarm clock. The time read 2:15 a.m., and I watched as it switched to 2:16 before I sighed and sat up in bed. I looked down and practically pissed myself when I saw Joanna had quietly sat up in bed as well and was staring straight at me. "Jesus fuck, dude, don't do that to me. I thought you were asleep," I hissed in the quiet, putting my hand against the heart pounding in my chest. It was dark, but the green halo from her clock illuminated her features slightly. She looked half asleep, honestly. Maybe I had woken her with my tossing and turning.
Joanna stared straight ahead, as if looking past me. I turned cautiously to peer behind me, my eyes peering into the darkness, and I squinted, trying to make out what she was seeing. What the hell was she looking at? "I told her not to," Joanna whispered softly. I whipped my head back and looked at her. "What?" I said, my voice croaking out of my throat. "I told her not to, and she did anyway." Joanna sighed, as if defeated. She pulled the cover up over her head and turned her back to me, nestling back into her sleep. I was frozen, staring at her in utter disbelief. After a few minutes, which dripped by like molasses, I heard her softly snoring again, and I knew she had fallen back asleep. I pulled my blanket up to my chin and curled up, turning my back to the darkness and forcing my eyes closed. The next thing I remember was opening my eyes again and seeing the sun cascading through her window. I could smell Belinda cooking breakfast downstairs, and I could hear her humming along to some pop song from the 80s. My eyes hurt when it blinked, but I remember feeling wide awake. Joanna was still snoring softly, her hair splayed round like a tumbleweed, her arms outstretched above her head, and her leg crooked over and under mine in an uncomfortable pretzel.
Somewhere deep in the house, a phone rang, and the low hum of the music paused. A few minutes later, I heard a mug shatter and a slight scream come from downstairs. Joanna and I shot up out of bed and raced downstairs, our hearts racing. "What's wrong?" I asked as we came into the kitchen and saw Belinda bent over on the floor. "Mom?" Joanna asked softly, terrified of stepping into the minefield of broken ceramic in the kitchen. Belinda looked up, tears leaving black streaks of mascara down her face, and stared at us. She whimpered softly and bit her lip, her arms encircled around her torso as if hugging herself. "Oh, Jojo, it's..." She paused, catching her breath. "It's your Nana. There's been an accident." Joanna stood rigid at the base of the steps, her breath catching in her throat. "Well, do you remember?" Joanna asked again, snapping me out of my memory. Yeah, all too fucking well, I remember that. Nana Stephanie was always so kind. That was a..." I trailed off, trying to find the right words. I didn't think saying, "that was an incredibly creepy time in our lives," was the right thing to say, so I opted for, "that was a hard month for your family. What about it? Remember when I went all spooky and shit on you? You were so freaked out, and I tried to play it off like I didn't remember." She trailed off, putting a piece of her hair into her mouth and sucking slightly. She looked so small in that moment. I wanted to hug her and ask if we could change the subject. "Yeah, well, you tried to tell me I was crazy, but it was something." I didn't want to shame her and tell her it was beyond terrifying. How can you be terrified of your best friend? Plus, I wanted her to feel comfortable enough to tell me what she was feeling now. "Yeah, well," she started, standing up and walking over to the railing of the foyer that looked down into her entryway. "That day when we were singing, I felt something. It was like I was seeing something that couldn't have been there." I stood up and walked over next to her, putting my elbows on the railing and bending over it slightly to look up into her face. I saw Nana Stephanie, only it wasn't her as she was. She was all cut up and covered in glass.
I staggered backwards off the rail, my breath catching. "Joe, that's not fucking funny," I said. I remembered the funeral for Nana Stephanie. For some reason, she had requested an open casket in her will. I don't think Nana Stephanie ever anticipated her face getting practically split in half due to her steering wheel, but the funeral home did their best effort to fix it. I remember her porcelain skin marred by an unnervingly white sliver from her temple to her chin, jagged like a lightning bolt. Reconstructed with putty as best as they could, but still incredibly noticeable. "Katie, I saw her, as clear as I'm seeing you now. I begged her not to get into the car. I begged her to stay home. I saw her at 9 p.m. that night in my bedroom, mangled. She didn't wreck her car until 10:45. How did I see her?" She trailed off. I felt my blood turn cold, and for the first time in my life, I had no words. I sank to the floor near my abandoned friendship bracelet project. I couldn't process what she was telling me. Joe, that's..." Words genuinely escaped me. I know, it's crazy, but it's true. And that's not the first time it's happened, and I'm afraid it won't be the last. I have nobody to talk to about it, and I've wanted to tell you for so long, but My mind was racing a mile a minute. I finally found the question I had been meaning to ask, but was too afraid to before. "So, why are you telling me now?" Joanna stopped pacing, her back turned to me. I could see her quiver slightly, like a chill had traveled down her spine. She turned slowly to me, her words coming slowly and measured. She stared off behind me, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My mind was flooded with visions of that inky darkness in the corner of her room that night. I began to slowly turn my head, my eyes reaching the corner of my periphery when, "Girls?" Belinda's voice rang out from the first floor. "It's time for bed." I slouched against a beanbag on the floor, feeling just as deflated as the chair I was propped against. Joanna smiled at me softly, bending over and offering my hand. "It's nothing, Katie. I didn't mean to scare you. I was just thinking of Nana." Her eyes darted between the space behind me and her friendship bracelet on the floor. Red was one of her favorite colors.
Remember that pretty ruby bracelet she had? That's it. I was just thinking of her and remembered something that spooked me. I stared at her with a look of pure bewilderment. She was scaring the hell out of me because of a memory? I took her hand and stood up slowly, the fear draining from my chest to the bottom of my feet and dissipating with each step towards the bathroom. Joanna laughed and shoved me playfully as we collided through the doorframe into the bathroom to get ready for bed. I went to exit the bathroom, heading for the bedroom I knew practically as well as my own, when I stopped. Joanna had paused and was standing still in the bathroom, staring at her reflection intently.
You good, Joe? I called back, pausing mid-step. Oh, Joanna snapped to attention. Yeah, sorry. We crawled into bed and turned off the lights. Joanna fished the remote out from under the covers and turned on the tiny TV in the corner of her room. We flipped through channels before landing on reruns of some cartoon we were definitely too old to be respectably watching, stifling our laughter into our pillows so Belinda wouldn't chastise us. I don't know how much time had passed, but my eyes snapped open suddenly, and the muffled static of the TV was droning in the background. The blazing sea of white illuminated everything and hurt to look at. I poked at Joanna, mumbling, "Joe, turn off the TV, it's too bright," and received a loud, deep snore in response. Without trying to open my eyes again, my hands searched for the remote that had been lost between our covers so I could get respite from the blazing light. Finally, I found it, and the TV clicked off with a satisfying hiss, allowing the world to once again be enveloped in darkness. I started to settle back down, turning my back to where the TV had been and ready to fall asleep again when my eyes shot open, and I flipped around to look at the clock on the dresser next to the TV. The faded neon green numbers read 2:14 a.m., and a cold pinprick feeling filled my chest. That was just a coincidence, a very unfortunate, very creepy coincidence. I turned my back to the clock and pulled the covers up to my chin, forcing my eyes closed. I was counting sheep in my head, willing my body to go back to bed, when I felt Joanna stir next to me. Joe, I peeked my eyes open and looked to where she was lying. I clasped my hand around my mouth quickly so as not to scream. Joanna was sitting straight up, rigid as a board, and staring into the darkness behind me. My heart was pounding so loudly in my ears that I swore that it would wake the whole house. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I stared in horror at Joanna sitting across from me, her eyes half open as if she was still sleeping. I opened my mouth to speak when I heard her raspy voice whisper, "Don't touch her." Fear flooded my system like ice water, and it felt like I was drowning in it. My head was pounding, and it felt like an eternity was passing, and I was going insane with fear. "Joanna," I managed to rasp out, my breath hitching in my chest. "Please," Joanna whimpered, never taking her eyes off the darkness behind me. End of part 1. The second part of this story is not out yet, so, yeah.